So in this video of the series, we're going to dive deeper into the concept of assessments, whether they may be tests or quizzes, exams, papers, exercises, call them whatever you like, including discussion boards, and we'll look at gradebook as well. So go to my Seneca, go to courses, and I'll just randomly pick a course like this one here. And make sure you go to an ultra converted course or an upcoming course. So from a previous video, you learned how to do basic setup in terms of a calendar, course image, making the course available. And then in the last video, you learned how to manage your content. So I have some very simple content. I have not built this out, but a suggestion was that in addition to the introduction module, and that's the gray box here, when you click multiple items to welcome the student, that includes your course outline, your addendum, faculty information, which is all in here, and the land acknowledgement. What I suggest is that you curate all of your course content into a main module called weekly sessions, and then week by week. So we're on a 14-week semester. I'll build up all 14 weeks sooner or later, make them available one at a time to the students, and in each week I will align the content with my class discussions in a meaningful sort of way, and we'll get into more of that when we do the last video on fine-tuning. Make sure that you structure the course so that it is appropriate for your learner. Guide them. Keep in mind they are taking many courses, not just yours, and that if you allow them to look at content on a weekly basis, you'll save yourself 50 emails. Sir, where's this content, right? It's all in the weeks. And you can duplicate content as well. So look at the last video. But I do want to get into assessments. You do have to assess for every course, whether it's a pass, fail, or a percentage grade, letter grade. You do have to assess the course objectives or course outcomes, which of course come from program level outcomes. If there's an outcome, you must allow the student to demonstrate the knowledge gained or the skills or abilities, possibly attitudes, aptitudes. But if you don't have it in your objective, you generally shouldn't be assessing for grades at all. You can assess for just general knowledge or self-assessment, that's okay, but for grades you have to be careful. So I'm going to go into my week 1 folder, and in week 1, actually no, let's go to week 2. Some more content. I have a few files here, right? So documents, and I have maybe a few video tutorials, something on bedmiss, and I'll just make everything available for your students. But at some point, I might want to do an assessment. Now, is it week by week? Is it a midterm and a final? Is it whenever you choose, as often as you choose? It's in your course outline, as you know. Of course, the move is to streamline and do more sort of experiential or evidence-based type of assessments rather than the rote multiple choice true false memorization. There's still room for that, but if you can kind of move away from that idea, and the Seneca Teaching and Learning Department, of course, has a lot of resources to help you get there. I'm a big fan of open book assessments, realistic assessments, but that are open book, that maybe allow a student to speak to an industry professional, use internet resources. Of course, full citations and Seneca academic integrity policy applies as well. So let me show you. I want to add something at the bottom of week 2, and it could be anywhere. So I'll go to the bottom, click the plus sign, click create, and your options for assessment are, well, a test, call it a quiz, call it exam, whatever, or an assignment, or even a discussion or a journal, right? And you can be quite creative with this. So first I'm going to do an assignment, then I'll do a test, and discussion we did in the last video, but I can quickly show you again. Then we'll do gradebook, okay? So let's click on assignment, and you get a new panel popping up. First thing you want to do is give your assignment a name, and we'll call this reflections, right? Reflection about AI. So I'll just delete that. So that's the name of my item, and pretty much you're done. Because what an assessment does in the form of an assignment is it allows a place for a student to click, browse, and submit a file. Now that file could be a PDF, a Word, it could be PowerPoint, it could be Excel, it could be any file at all. Now, over on the right-hand side, you do have some options, right, that you want to set up. Now you can click the cog over here for setup to see all the options at once, or just click on due date, for example, and you'll see all of your options. So when is this due? Well, the last day I will accept it is 7. And myself, I like to allow people to do it up to 12 p.m. Actually, I will go 11:59. That's my standard. That's just the way I do things. Up to midnight of the day of your class, right? I'm going to prohibit late submissions, prohibit new attempts, which isn't even an option for me. We'll get into class conversations later, what that is all about, but I'm going to check it anyways so we can test it. And then down here, these are options for tests. This is not for an assignment, so leave those alone. Then to put this directly into a gradebook, right? So you don't have to think about that. It goes right into gradebook. You can choose a category. Now, does it matter which category? No, it does not. But for you to see when you have, let's say, 10, 20 different assessments, it'll be nice to put things into tests and then assignments and discussions and so on, right? Just for your sake there. I'm going to allow one attempt. Although if it was self-discovery or self-assessment, I might allow a person to do it several times. And keep in mind that if you have accommodated students, you might need to do adaptive release for them. We'll talk about that later. I'm going to grade the assignment using points out of, let's say in this case, I'll do out of 5. Do I want to see student names as I'm marking? Well, it's not even an option. You'll see them, okay? And there's no concept of, well, you have to look at the name when you're marking. The name will be there on their paper anyways. Do you have more than one grader for the student? And are you going to allow peer review? So more than one grader would be like, if I'm team teaching with somebody, right, or I have a TA, which I don't, I can now assign a second person simply by assigning the grader, okay? We generally don't do that, so it's just an extra feature. I'm going to post the grade automatically, which means if I mark the first paper today, the student will see their grade. Well, I'm not going to do that. Me personally, I don't allow anybody to see a grade until everybody can see it. It might take me a week to mark, right? Okay. Now, the results of the assessment, these come up later on, so we can take care of these later, and they're mostly for the test part, not necessarily an assignment. But do you want to allow a student to have an access code? Not allow, but make them have an access code to access the test. I don't use access code. If they're not in my class, they can't log into my course. If they can't log into my course, they will not have access to submit an assignment. So I don't do this. You could. And then there is a respondus. So if you're doing synchronous, on time, in time, all together type of a test, you can always have a respondus system. We can do a separate video on this if you ask, where their browsers are locked down, which means they can't cheat. Okay. Am I going to add a time limit for this assessment? No, there's a due date, right? So that's more for if it's like, in class, you have to write this paper right in class, or if it's for a test, right? 60-minute test, etc. We'll talk about grading rubrics in a separate video. And then aligning with goals or standards, we generally don't use this. That's a very higher order type of a feature. But if you were to have certain goals or milestones in your course, possibly to earn a credential or a badge, you can say completion of this particular assessment will allow you to achieve that level of standard or goal. Okay, we can do that later on as well. And I like this. I'm going to enable Safe Assign. Right, you don't have to, but if you're going to look at originality reports, make sure Safe Assign is on. I don't let my students view their own report. If they're going to plagiarize, why should I alert them before I catch them, right? And then I'm not going to exclude this submission from the database, because whatever my student submits, I want it as a point of reference for future submissions, okay? So let's click Save, right? And there we go. So if you needed to edit this, just go back to this cog over here. Now let's click this plus sign. You don't need to do anything with it because we're not adding any sort of questions to this particular assignment. It's just a submission. It's a Dropbox, right? We'll look at this section later as well. But if you had, let's say, answer 5 multiple choice questions and submit your assignment, sure, you can add those here if you wanted to. But we're done with this one. I'm going to go back, close, and you'll see that your assessment is right there. Now it's not open, but I'll open it. So I don't open my weekly folder until that week. So student will have access to it when I tell them they'll have access to it, right? So let's go to week 3. Let's add something in week 3. And I'll just minimize this over here. And in week 3, I want to add an actual quiz at the bottom. So I'll click the plus sign. Click Create. And this time you want to do a test. Again, that's just the word they use, test. You can call it whatever you like. Now this one will be called, let's call this week, 1, 2, 3 quiz. And call it whatever you like. Okay, so I have a good name for it. That's good. And again, same thing. Concept of due date, well, in this case, it means when do you have to do it by. So I'll give them, let's say today's my class on April the 6th. It ends at 12 a.m. That's it, done. Okay. I'm going to, these things I set in when I actually put the questions in. So let's pause on that for a second. I'm going to allow one attempt. It's out of 100 or whatever marks it's out of. And then I'm not going to post the grades automatically. And the rest we talked about earlier. So I will put a time limit, I believe. And again, when you put a time limit, be careful. You have to know your learner, right? So I generally say if it takes me 10 minutes to do it, I usually do a multiple of 5. Depends on the depth and the gravity of the assessment you're doing, right? So 60 minutes automatically submitted. I don't want the students, because then it's extra work for you to submit it yourself. So I'll just say 60 minutes, okay? I'm going to add questions over here. So plus sign, you've got a lot of different options here. A couple of them are a little bit new, and I'll show them to you in a minute. And you have options here to add like a page break. And you can also add text in between. So if I wanted to start off by adding text, I'll go here and I say, this quiz will cover material from week 1 to 3. Please respect the Seneca Academic Integrity Policy. Okay? Etc., etc., whatever instructions that you might need to give them, and you can have multiple text areas up here. And you can edit or delete using these 3 dots, right? So let's add a question. Plus. So a calculated formula question is appropriate when you have some sort of math equations you want the student to perform. There are all sorts of mathematical notations, etc. Functional calculator, I guess, something here. I don't fully understand this part, but if you're a math person teaching a math-related course, you can certainly have a student create the actual formula in here. Now, the add calculated numeric question is where you provide a calculation or a statement. Maybe there's some data involved, and the student would then calculate it somehow and then type in the correct answer in the form of some sort of a number. Essay question, we know it's open-ended, free form, and I will say briefly discuss the idea of AI and logistics. Now, of course, I gave the people instructions what briefly means, 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, or what it might be. Now, within the question, I could format the text up here. I can add notations and things using this, even code snippets, a little bit advanced tables. And I could link. So if I had a link to something that a student needs to see to do the question, I could put a link, a web link, I could attach files, and I could put rich media. And again, for my previous video, you probably want to go through cloud storage, okay? So now, the student will have a 10-point question that will give them a free-form box where they type in the answer to this question, okay? Now I can change the point value here. I'll say this is worth 5 points. And I'm not sure if you know what extra credit means, but let's say, and I do this on every quiz that I give 2 or 3 quizzes, just, open book, is if I had 10 questions that are worth marks, just to kind of see who is the higher end thinker, the really good professionally minded student, I will give 1 or 2 questions that are extra credit, not worth a lot of marks, maybe 1 or 2 marks, and good students will do it 4 marks or not. But extra credit means that if you don't do it or you get it wrong, you don't lose marks. But if you did it and you got it right, you can get up to 5 points for it. So it just adds on to your total point value. Okay? That's not a bad idea. Not for everybody, but not a bad idea. Now down here, what you can do is click here, example of a correct response, and actually provide the students, in terms of feedback, a good response. which means once they get the assessment back and they can see the results, you might want to give them a correctly worded answer. Now, I usually don't do that for longer questions, maybe some shorter ones on a practice quiz, just to give them feedback. I might even just, instead of typing in a lot of answer, I might say refer to this page in the booklet that I wrote, right? Something like that. And over here is, do you want to allow students to comment? It's always on. That means once they submit, they can actually comment something. Maybe there's something wrong with the question about their experience. Student usually don't, but there's always a box there they can make a comment, okay? So I'm going to save this one, and it looks just like that. Let's add one more. I think you all know what a fill-in-the-blank question is. It's a little bit tricky to set up. I like it, actually. I use it 1 or 2 times in every quiz. And it sounds simple. People say it's kindergarten-y, but it actually isn't. It actually forces a person to sequence a bunch of words within an idea, within a thought. So I'm going to type in my question here like this. So type the word that is missing in the acronym CIA. All right, so I will start like this. So I'll say central, and I want them to fill in the word I, right, intelligence. So what you do is you put it in brackets and you say word 1, or whatever, it doesn't really matter what you put in, but square brackets and then agency. Now, what's the value of this? It forces them to look up the content to find the middle word, or they might know. Then you click next step, and you might need to click it again. And it says it's blank 1, so change whatever you put to blank 1, and you simply type in the word, and it will be intelligence. Now, you spell it correct, because if you don't, everybody gets it wrong. And down here, is it an exact match? Yeah, in my case it is. Contain part of it. So if they said intelligent and you want to let it go, that's okay. Or match some sort of a pattern. Now, the pattern, it all depends on how many answers, varied answers you get. So I'm just going to say exact match. Okay. Is it case sensitive, meaning capital I? Yeah, in this case it has to be capital I. And we'll save it. And there we go. Now, if I want to edit this question, of course, I'll change the point values. I think this one is worth no more than 2. Right? And we can just, again, you have to do next step and save. Now, let's add one more. Plus sign. Let's do I'll do hotspot and matching later on, but let's do a multiple choice, because that one we all know. I'm not a huge fan. I think we should all avoid multiple choices as much as we can. At best, it's worth 1 mark. But there's room for multiple choice in that, in mine, if I give you 7 longer answer questions, I might throw in 2 or 3 multiple choice just to get your thought process warmed up, right? Students appreciate them, and I don't like to make them tricky at all. They're mostly giveaways, right? So I'll put in which agency in Canada is equal to the CIA. All right, answer 1. Let's put Revenue Canada. I'm assuming that's a thing, right? Revenue. Oops, I pressed tab. Let's put, I don't know, OHIP, if that makes any sense. Let's put CSIS. And let's put RCMP. Now, of course, the correct answer is CSIS. Standard, it starts off with 4 possible options. You can delete the options. You can reorder the options for whatever reason. But you can add additional choices. And I've moved away from 4 options. I usually do 7 or 8. To make a person think. Now, with almost every question, I didn't tell you this, you can check that, move that over, automatic feedback, and you can give the student feedback if they got it right, and feedback if they got it incorrect. Now, mostly, of course, you would do that for incorrect responses, just to let the student know why they were wrong. Most people don't do this. I think this is more in the fine-tuning category. But I like to do this for my practice quizzes. The actual ones, no. Practice, yes. So as they're practicing, I'm guiding them to where the content is, the page reference, or at least some additional things to think about. And if you take the time to do that in fine-tuning mode, you'll be surprised at how much knowledge you evolve in the student's mind. And they might even appreciate it. So let's click Save. Let's do one more. I'm not going to do true-false. I think you all get that idea. And you can always reuse questions that were already in So I'll just go to reuse questions, right? Let's have a look. If you had items already in another type of a quiz, so we only have one, but if I had other quizzes, I can go in and say, okay, this essay question, I want to reuse it. Now, should I? Well, if you're going to do 20 different essay questions that start with similar wording, just copy paste the wording or copy it here. So you can just click, right? Check that box and copy the questions. Now, I'm not going to do that, okay? So I'm going to continue. I don't want to do that. Let's go over here. What else do we have? In between, I could add a file if I wanted to. File from my computer, file from my cloud storage. And the reason you might want to do that is as a person's doing questions, you might have, let's say, an Excel data set or a PDF document that might guide them, to help them, to aid them in answering questions. Now, let's do plus. And two types of questions you might not have used. I think there's value. I think they're pretty cool. Your students might appreciate it. Remember, anything rich media or graphic-y, your students, the new learner, will appreciate. Let's do matching first. Now, matching is something we've done before, probably in kindergarten, and you're probably saying, yeah, it's too Mickey Mouse. Well, not really. I mean, what if I gave you a set of thoughts, ideas, or points, terms, and then over on the right, I gave you a bunch of possible words that they're matched up with? Well, there's value in it, just to get the person's kind of thought process going. So on the left side, I'll say, okay, which fruit is sour? Okay, and over here I'll put an answer, lemon. I don't know if lemon's a fruit, let's just say, okay? Let's say I taught that lemon is a fruit. Then I'll add another pair. Which vegetable is orange? Well, I don't know, carrot. Yeah, I guess it's orange, it's a vegetable, I believe. I'll add one more. Which vegetable is bitter? And I will say bitter melon. Now, it has the word melon in it, so somebody has to really think. Now, keep in mind, as you go, there's bold, italics, underlined, math notations, and as part of the question, you can actually put an image or an attachment or a video. I'm not sure under what context you would do that, but you can, okay? Now, what I like to do is I have three possible answers, three possible prompts. I will add a few more words just to trip you up, okay? And not trip you up in that sense, but make you think. How's that? Okay, so let's add one more. We'll put lime. Now, lime wouldn't be fair, right? That could conflict with lemon, but I'll put kiwi. And one more. Come on, it's challenging. Come up with some sort of a vegetable or a fruit, and I'm going to call this okra. Okra might be bitter, but I don't know. I don't think so. Slimy. Now, here's another option. What if a person only got 2 out of 3 correct? Did they get the whole question wrong? Or did they get 2 out of 3 marks? Well, depending on the question, the severity of the question, I'm going to say, well, no, you got to do all of it. All or nothing. Or I can give you partial credit. But in some cases, you might want to subtract points for incorrect matches, which, I mean, be careful with that, right? So how is that any different than partial credits? Or allow negative score question, which means you can actually lose marks if you get enough of them incorrect, which please don't do. That's not fair, okay? So let's put the question text up here, which I forgot. And I would say something like match the word with the term correctly. Done. Let's click save. I mean, it's pretty okay. It's good. You decide when you want to use it. It's a fun question. I think I'll assign it 5 points. And you know what? I'm going to make it extra credit. Done. Okay, one more. Now, by the way, the student won't see it like this. That's just for you, right? You got that. So plus, let's do a hotspot. I love hotspots. I use them. Not all the time, not too much, but there's always, most courses, there's always a reason you can possibly use what a hotspot is, okay? So I'm going to type in a question, and I'm going to say click on the shutter button. Now, I'm teaching photography. I'm talking about camera devices. I'm going to upload a picture from my device, and I happen to have a picture here somewhere. of a beautiful camera. There we go. I sold this on my auction. Got some good money for it. Thank you to the buyer. There we go. So, of course, the students have been introduced to camera equipment. This is a D70 Nikon. They've been introduced to the simple concepts. I just want to see, can you identify something on the screen? So that's a shutter button, and I want them to be able to click on it. So you have two choices. You can do a rectangle hotspot or a somewhat freeform polygon hotspot. Let's do a rectangle. And there you go. You just kind of move it around. Make sure it doesn't overlap a territory. So for example, if I'm going to ask you what these buttons are, make sure it's not an overlap, okay? Now I could click and erase all the hotspots and try a polygon. Now polygon is where you kind of dot, okay? So you click the first dot, just kind of go around. It's not perfect circle, but it gives you a more narrow zone, more refined, more defined zone. And the last one is a simple click. There we go. That's a right answer. Now I'm going to put in a couple of incorrect answers there as well. That might look like a button, right? Okay, so I got 1 and 2. You can do as many as you like. So my first option is, that is correct. That is incorrect. This is the mode button. Mode slider. I don't know. What do you call it? Option. Which is the correct one? This one. Okay. Let's click save. And we have a hotspot. Maybe worth 2 points. Done. Now, you can move the questions up and down, as you know, drag. You can delete them, you can edit them. They're all there. Now, I'm going to go to my settings. And let's have a look at the options that just popped up. So you have to do this by 4/2/23, 12 a.m. And these are again more for assignments. But over here, these options are more relevant to a multi-question assessment. I like to display one question at a time. Some people like to open up all the questions at once, but I want my students one at a time. But I am going to allow them to backtrack. So if they complete question 10 and they want to go back to question 2, I will allow it. And in fact, forces them to keep note of which questions they want to go back to. Maybe providing all at once maybe allows for copy and paste and sharing with other people. I am going to randomize my questions, so not every student will get the same question in the same order. And I will randomize the answers as well, and that's more applicable to, let's say, multiple choice. So A becomes D and C becomes B, etc. Okay? Now, this stuff we already talked about, maximum points 10. And let's see down here, I think we have everything ready, good to go. Your time limit. There's no concept of safe assign, although let me turn it on. Maybe the essay question goes into safe assign, okay? Good, and I will not exclude it. Let's save it and save. So let's see what it looks like on the main screen. It looks like a quiz right there. And again, you can duplicate it and you can open it just when you need to. So now, if you wanted to edit this, what do? Well, you can delete it over here. You can, let's click edit and let's see what that does. I believe that only allows you to edit, well, the whole thing. There we go. We're good. Allows you to edit it. I think if you click on it as well, it lets you edit as well. Okay. Now, where does all this stuff go? Well, that's called a gradebook. You know what gradebook is from the old Blackboard. In Blackboard Ultra, it's the same idea, but the look and feel is different. You'll get used to it. It is different, but I think it's more streamlined. So after a semester or two, I think we're going to learn to like it better than the old one. So let me go to Gradebook and take a look. I mean, it's right there. So we have two items that I put in, a reflection assignment and week 1 to 3 quiz. You'll see all of your items here. You can move them back and forth. And in fact, there's nothing to grade, right? So it's not going to show you any items. And I wish I had students I could show you. Maybe that's a future video, right? And remember, keep your questions coming. Anything that's specific that I didn't cover here, we'll create a separate video for you. And also check our catalog of videos, because a lot of more granular information is available about Gradebook especially, okay? So you can do setup if you like. But I'm just going to show you individually what you can do. So if I wanted to add an item here in Gradebook without creating a separate assessment, I could. So I'll do plus over here and I'll say add item. Now along the way you can add an attendance grade item. So if you're taking attendance in class, and of course, and I'll just get out of this for a second, this new version of Blackboard lets you do attendance right here. Okay, there's a whole attendance area where it just pops up a bunch of names. Again, I don't have any students, so I can't do that. But I can add attendance for a specific date and then just check the student names off. Just make sure your screen is turned off, right? So nobody can see that. But let me go back into Gradebook. I could add an attendance item here. I could add a calculation, and that would be like a weighted column. So if you had, let's say, the first half of the semester, and you wanted to show a weighted grade out of 100 for whatever a student's done up to that point, you can always do that. If I had 10 quizzes worth 2 marks each and I wanted to just have one overall quiz grade, add them all up, I could do that as well. But I'm going to add an item here. And what this would be is I could say snap list. So in my class, let's say I asked a group of students to get up and write things on the board within 5 minutes. That's a snap list. There was no document. There's nothing they submitted online. It wasn't a quiz. It just, I looked at it and I put a grade next to their name. And I could put the date and the time, and I'll make it worth 5 marks. And that'll be a Gradebook item. Okay, done. So I kind of like it. Later, again, we will create a video once I have students populated and I could show you exactly how to grade. And what you want to look out for there is if I had, let's say, 30 students worth of assignments in, can I view the assignment right on the screen and make notations right on the paper, and or type in feedback for the student with the grade? If you get used to that, I think it's I mean, for most papers that people give, I think that's a lot better. Just do it right on the screen, make your notes on the screen versus going back and forth. Okay? Now, that's, yeah, I mean, there we go. That's your assessments, your grade books. Is there more? Yeah, there's a little bit more. We'll do that later on. I won't do discussions here. That's a last video. Go have a look. But whether you treat a discussion, actually, you know what? I am going to do it. Whether you treat a discussion as a gradable item or just a free-for-all, that's okay. So let's just do one here in week 3. I'm going to click wherever I want my discussion. Let's say right before the quiz. Create. Discussion or journal, right, if you use journals. And over here I'll just say start discussion on AI in logistics. It's a very general question, and I could again add supporting files, attachments, images, videos, whatever you need to support people's discussion, right, participation. And the title here will be AI in logistics. Okay, and you can have as many of these as you like. Now, if it's free form, meaning people just do it on their own, there's no grades, you encourage the students to do it, right? We know how that works. But if you wanted to have it as part of a grading, part of your grade book, click over here. It will actually say, yeah, it will be part of the grade book. And which post do you want to look at? Do you want to prevent the students from editing their posts? I mean, depends, right? Depends on your pedagogy. And you actually want to grade the discussion. And when you do that, it's going to say what's the last date somebody can post. And I'll say, okay, I'll just randomly say 7th. And it will be part of discussion, and this one will be worth 2 marks. Now, rubric, we'll do a separate video on how to apply rubrics to various assessments. What I do personally, I don't use that rubric. I actually create my own in a PDF, and I attach that as part of the learning. So if in week 3 I'm doing content and there's a quiz, I'll say here's the rubric for that quiz or that assignment, just so I can attach it directly to my teaching on a weekly basis versus hidden over here. But we'll certainly do a separate video on rubrics, okay? So Let's save, and done. It shows up like this. It's a discussion item. Now, your discussions also show up here on discussions. Discussion. And when you click on it, as students reply, first of all, make it available, of course. As they reply, you'll be able to manage their replies and sub-replies, replies to a reply, and a response. So you can go in and response. So whether it's guided or not, whether it's facilitated or just students are on their own, that's up to you. You can do as little as count the number of posts or assess, of course, the quality of each post. So what's left to do? We can dig deeper into gradebook, maybe calculations. That is based on questions that you ask. We can certainly look at groups. So when you're at the point where you want to see groups, group assessments, or simply create groups to deploy a quiz. So if you have 3 versions of a quiz and you want to create 3 different groups, there's a whole section over here about groups, and we will actually then right there, we'll talk about that later. It's difficult today because I don't have students in there, but trust me, when you ask, we will create that video. Okay? So look out for the next video, the last one in the series. It is about fine-tuning. What is fine-tuning? Well, you have a great course. You took the time to revision it in light of a new learner, a new generation. You kept in mind accessibility, AODA, or maybe you didn't. Fine-tuning is just that, adding visual elements, visual cues, looking at what additional functionality can I build in for 2 reasons. To make your students' learning experience better quality, and second, to make your academic life as an academic easier.